Clicky. Okay. Well, welcome tonight. If you're watching on recording, we want to welcome you as well. If you're catching on Zoom a little bit later, and I'm not aware that you joined us, I want to welcome you as well. And we are in Isaiah chapter 23. So it's part 23. Chapter 23, we've stayed pretty well in the text. There have been a few times where we've done actually two chapters in a part. So that's been exciting to do those chapters as well. So, but it's part 23, Isaiah 23. Let's get started tonight. Okay, so here's our introduction. So Phoenicia is a very interesting study. It really is. And we can see how ancient Phoenicia likens to this modern day world. Tyre of Phoenicia was the capital of ancient trade. It was the ancient Wall Street. Okay, so you know what I mean by Wall Street, right? Everybody understand that, of course. So talking about the stock market in America and the stock exchange around the world, it had a large shipping port, and ships would travel to places like Alexandria, Egypt, Cyprus, Crete, Carthage of Libya, which is located in northern Africa, Rome, Italy, and Tarshish, which was likely in Spain. And so Spain was the western border of the outer reaches in the ancient biblical realm. Ships would rarely travel through the Strait of Gibraltar. Of course, you know it wasn't called the Strait of Gibraltar in those days, but that strait, you know what I'm referring to. They would rarely go through that strait and continue to the open Atlantic Ocean. There was just too much fear and superstition in those days for many of these ancient seafarers to go that far. So Phoenicia's capital was the great city of Tyre. Tyre was known as the Babylon of the sea. It had great walls and towers for defense. There were powerful armies that defended the city. They hired many mercenaries, which means armies from other nations. They would hire them on to fight for them. Caravan routes would follow from the east of China to Tyre, India as well. The merchants and leaders of Tyre were incredibly wealthy and powerful. These merchants were allied with Israel and with pagan empires to the east and to the west. These Phoenician cities, Tyre and Sidon, were the ancient equivalent of New York and London. Caravan routes to the east, once again, connected Tyre with places like China and India. So it's very, very, very influential place at that time. So if you can imagine, this is just an artery of trade, okay? So there were good and evil things that came from Tyre. So let's talk about that. It was the Phoenicians of Tyre that supplied the timber and other materials to build the Temple of Solomon's day through the king of Tyre, known as Hiram. Remember the cedars of Lebanon? Okay, so the Tyrrhenian Phoenician people, not far from that area of where ancient Tyre was, is a forest in Lebanon, and there are these huge cedars known as the cedars of Lebanon, and they were used to build the Temple of Solomon. And so yeah, and they supplied it. These Phoenician people did. And it's also interesting to point out that the Tyrrhenians supplied the materials for the second temple of Zerubbabel and Joshua, the son of Josedek, in 536 BC. But it was also Phoenicia who provided a princess named Jezebel. She came from Sidon. And she reigned with wicked King Ahab over northern Israel. Now, Jezebel, a lot of people don't understand how wicked she really was, but she introduced to the northern Israelis Baalism. And not only Baalism, but an immoral religion called Asherah worship. And I won't go into it. It's too wicked to talk about in a setting like this, of course, or any setting really. Asherah was a pagan fertility goddess. And it was her daughter, or their daughter, hers and Ahab's daughter, Athaliah, who married Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. So then she's spreading like a disease into Judah now, bringing Baalism and Asherah worship there. So Athaliah further brought in the pagan corruption of Phoenicia into the southern kingdom. So 6 prophets, including Isaiah, proclaimed prophetic burdens, or, when we call these things burdens, we call them hard messages of condemnation and judgment. And they went solely against Phoenicia, and more specifically to Tyre. Now, the list includes, here's the list of prophets that condemned Tyre. You've got Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Joel, Amos, Zechariah, and then we have it here in Isaiah. So this would make Tyre a very important and significant study in the Bible. Tyre was a world trader. Interesting. We're gonna tie this into our modern world tonight. They were dependent on for wealth of the many in the ancient world. They were like the shipmasters and the traders, so to speak. Truly, Tyre once again was known as the Babylon of the sea. So now that we set the scene for you, let's go into the verses. So in verse 1, Isaiah prophetically introduced God's burden against Tyre. So that's verse 1. Here's God introducing his burden. The burden of Tyre. This is not a good message. You follow that? Howl, ye ships of Tarshish, for it is laid waste. Now, when you see the word howl there, it doesn't mean they're going to be barking like a dog. It's like, oh, it just means you're going to be so upset you will cry out loud and it will sound like a howl. And so, howl ye ships of Tarshish, for it is laid waste, so that there is no house, no entering in. From the land of Chittim, it is revealed to them. We'll get into where Chittim is all about. We'll talk about that now. So the people should howl. This is where we should go with this prophecy. They should howl, these Phoenician people. They should howl. They should. Doesn't mean they would, but they should. In a terrible and pitiful grief all the way to the western end of the ancient world concerning the desolation of Tyre. So it shouldn't just be them, but other people as well. Because Tyre would be laid waste. It would turn into a useless moonscape. Do you see the word says, so that there is no house? Okay. What does that mean? That means it's going to be so destroyed, there is not going to be a house left to even go into. Chittim was a reference to Cyprus, along with the middle islands of the Mediterranean. Very interesting. I'm actually going through also, studying personally in my personal studies, Acts 27. We're going to catch up with it when we go through our series through Acts. But as I'm going through Acts 27, he goes through some islands. And so I kind of went on Google Maps, I kind of do that nowadays, and you can kind of look at these islands. And I was looking at Crete, and I was looking at different islands, because there's loads of islands around Greece and Turkey, and just hundreds of them. And in ancient times, that area was known as Chittim, okay? So all those little islands, I'm talking about, Sicily, I'm talking about Crete, I'm talking about Malta, I'm talking about the islands around the Aegean Sea, around Egypt, Greece and Turkey, and down into Cyprus, which is in the northeast corner of the Mediterranean Ocean. All those islands are known as, or were known as, Chittim, okay? So that's what that's a reference to. And of course, they were used with Tyre. And even in Paul's day, those islands were used as shipping ports for the ships. Very interesting, okay? So you see that you can find the ruins on these islands, because the islands, of course, survive today. And these ancient island dwellers would hear of the destruction of Tyre, and they would not be happy. Of course they wouldn't, because they would lose their income. You follow that? Shipping ports close down. What happens to their job? Well, they don't have a job. But God was not pleased with the ways of Tyre, and he would bring it to its end along with their powerful economy. Now, the question is, can God do this? Well, he's done it already. Can he do it today? Can he take this economy and upturn it? Can he? Yeah, he's done it already. And so he certainly can do it again. And that's what we can learn from the destruction of Tyre, okay? Because it's not just a little fishing town. I'm talking about a city. This is okay. So we find that Isaiah's prophecies against the other nations began from the east with Babylon, chapter 13. So that's what we've been studying. It ended with the west with Tyre of Phoenicia. So Tyre was one of the most famous cities in the ancient world. It was a major trading center with a large seaport. Tyre was very wealthy, and it was very wicked. The city of Tyre was rebuked by Jeremiah in Jeremiah 25 and 47, Ezekiel chapter 26 to 28. There's like, what's that, 4 chapters or 3 chapters given to Tyre. Joel chapter 3, verse 4 through 8. Amos 1, verse 9 through 10, and Zechariah chapter 9, verse 3 and 4. And we find a warning to Israel against political alliances with unstable neighbors. We kind of learned that last week about Egypt. Remember, we talked about that? About Egypt. You just don't ally yourself with someone who's going to fall, going to be destroyed, Israel. So Tyre was one of these. And Judah needed to beware and stay away from Tyre. So that's hence the prophecy, okay? You with me? And also to warn these people of Tyre that their end is coming. Verse 2, by mentioning Sidon's desolation, that would mean that the entire empire of Phoenicia would be destroyed, okay? All of it. God says it's going to be destroyed. It's going to be over. Isaiah chapter 23, verse 2. Be still, ye inhabitants of the isle, thou whom the virgins of Sidon that pass over the sea have replenished. Why be still? Because once again, it's understood that even Sidon will be decimated and will be destroyed. And so that's the end of Phoenicia. And because of Tyre's destruction, the sea merchants around the ancient world should pause and ponder the destruction of the Phoenicians. Everyone should be still and think about it. That's what it's saying there. You know, ponder is. Just ponder how great this is. I mean, you know, if we sat back and we just pondered the fall of London, I mean, none of us could really understand that. We just like, well, oh, London's been there for, you know, a long time, over 1,000 years, being destroyed. But that's how it was for them, okay? I'm just trying to put it into perspective so you understand that you got to think about this because in their thinking, Tyre would never fall. It would never be destroyed. It would definitely be fine. It had a huge fortress. It had a huge army. It could withstand besiegement for hundreds of years, and we'll talk about that. So well, that's right. Of course they were. And they were also, and Tyre was relying on the islands to as for shipping so that they would go through these islands and people would need the work. So yeah, there was trade in the islands. There was and those islands would get all kinds of exotic goods because they would get things from China, they would get things from India, they would get things from other parts, from the Babylonian area. I mean, they would get things all from all over the world. And so it was you know, for it to fall, it's just like, well, it's never going to happen. Well, it did. Okay, so Sidon, the Phoenician port to the north of Tyre, so it's also going to be destroyed, and no one in the world would be supplied. That's what it's saying. Be still, it's going to be over. The destruction of these cities would complete the depreciation and destruction of Phoenicia. So it would depreciate and then it would be destroyed. We'll get into the destruction in a bit. Verse 3. It was Tyre's economy that empowered the Egyptians. So remember, we talked about Egypt and they were together. So they were allies. The Egyptians and the people of Phoenicia were allies. They worked together. And so this is what verse 3 is all about. And by the great waters, the seed of Sihor, the harvest of the river is her revenue, and she is the mart of the nations. In other words, the Tyre is the mart of the nations for places like Sihor. Why? What's Sihor talking about? Okay, let me get into that. The Egyptians were dependent upon the economy of Phoenicia to distribute their products. She's the mart of the nations. That's not Egypt, it's Tyre. Yet the Egyptian economy would be diminished with the destruction of Tyre. Egypt would be greatly reduced, as exampled by a reference to Sihor, which is a Nile River tributary. So the Nile River had obvious tributaries. It had rivers that flowed into it. That's what a tributary is. And one of the tributaries, and it was a major tributary, was a river called Sihor. And if Sihor is, I'm sure it was very fertile and there was a lot to do with planting and crops and things like that in their economy. Well, then it would, if it's finished, well, then you're done. So Egypt, who supplied to the nations working in tandem with Phoenicia, would now be able to supply very little to their customers. Their revenue would fall into recession or even depression. So it says Egypt is basically saying it's like this. Egypt, you're going to go through depression. You're going to go through a financial difficulty. You're going to face difficulty. And so that's what that is. So hold on, where are we at here? Why would okay, hold on, okay. I see where we're going. Okay, so now we're in verse 4 through 7. All right. So therefore, a lamentation is given to Egypt, okay? So that's what we have here. We have this lamentation, and it's gonna pass all the way from Phoenicia to Egypt, okay? So here it is. These are 4 verses. Be thou ashamed, O Zidon, for the sea hath spoken, even the strength of the sea, saying, I travail not, nor bring forth children. Neither do I nourish up young men, nor bring up virgins. As at the report concerning Egypt, so shall they be sorely pained at the report of Tyre. Sorely pained Egypt will be. Pass ye over to Tarshish. All the way to Tarshish? Yeah. Howl, ye inhabitants of the isle, which is a reference to all the islands, really, not just Cyprus, but Crete, Cilicia, different other islands. Is this your joyous city, whose antiquity is of ancient days? Her own feet shall carry her afar off to sojourn. What does that mean? If they're finished, they'll have to run like refugees. Why would Egypt experience great sorrow when Tyre fell? Simply because Egypt depended on Tyre's shipping and trading expertise to promote and carry their products around the world. Egypt would lose an important trading partner when it came to the destruction of Tyre. So what had Tyre brought to the world but wicked pride? It talks about, I don't bring forth children, don't nurse up young men, bring up virgins. Okay. What's this? Well, she brought not the blessing of children. Is that not a testimony to the international companies of our day? I really believe that the international conglomerates of our day are against the family. Listen to me, families, tonight. They're against the family. They are. They're fighting against family, and this is what God hates. You see, with families, these companies would have to provide insurance benefits and other paid leave for pregnant mothers, paternity leave, all kinds of things. That costs them money. Wouldn't it be better to have just a bunch of single people that work for them and they don't have to give them all these benefits that they would have to give to a family? It costs them money to have a family in their corporation. So they would rather decrease the world's population by confusing families and individuals through their cynical and sinister global agenda. We live in a Babylon today. There's no getting around it. We see it. These evil anti-family principles are all hinged in the love of money. I think even all this confusion, this gender confusion, all of it, it's designed to destroy the family. It's a satanic destruction of the family. And God is for the family. Now, Paul warned us. And why did they do this? Because of the love of money. He warned us that the love of money is the root of all evil. And there is nothing new. There was nothing new then. There's nothing new now. Therefore, the destruction of Tyre would be a sad testimony to those on the earth when they finally hear the report of her ruin. Reread Revelation 18 with this in mind. When it comes to the end of this study, I'll go into that. The ancient people around the world would howl in grief from Tarshish to the Isle of Cyprus. They would sing terrible and sad funeral dirges over the ruin of Tyre. Very interesting. So in verse 8 through 9, those who live for self-exaltation and personal glory would be humbled just as Tyre was in her day. They were very proud, very condescending people. I see that in our day again. You got these people that really think that they are better than other people. Well, here you go. Who hath taken this counsel against Tyre, the crowning city, whose merchants are princes, whose traffickers are the honorable of the earth? You see, God's being a little sarcastic here. You get that? The Lord of hosts have proposed it to stain the pride of all glory and to bring into contempt all the honorable of the earth. There you go. Interesting, isn't it? You see, her princes were well known and honorable. Oh, yes. They were household names in that time. This pride caused them a problem. They were filled with pride over their self-achievement, since they did achieve. But it was not over royalty or morality. It wasn't that type of achievement. It wasn't something that they inherited. No, these Tyrrhenian elites were simply just good at business. And because of their self-exaltation, they ignored the Lord and they brought it upon themselves. And they treated God with contempt. Verse 9 is a key verse for all who would glorify themselves. God will stain their pride and he will bring them into everlasting contempt. Now, the word contempt means to treat something or someone as worthless and beneath consideration. So if you ever wonder what the word contempt means, that's what it means. It means to treat something or someone as worthless and beneath consideration. And there are people who treat the things of God in this way, aren't there? I mean, I meet people like that. They'll treat me, I'll try to give them the gospel, and they'll treat the gospel like it's worthless and beneath consideration. That's contempt, by the way. It is contempt. All right. And when people do that, they better be careful, because if they're going to treat the things of God in this way, God will have his final say against them. They won't have the final say. They won't have the last word. God will. Oh, it's such a terrible thing. And so we see this in Tyre. God would destroy Tyre because he hated the pride of these people. Pride separates people from God, and he will bring these people to judgment. As we examine our life, we must remember that all true accomplishments in our lives come from God's help. We have no real reason to take pride in our own achievements. God must always be given credit for anything good in our lives. Amen. Amen. Okay, so in verse 10 through 12, the leaders of Tyre would have no place to hide from the wrath of God. There's no place to hide. When God's angry and he's going to bring judgment, you can drill to the center of the earth and you're still not going to hide from him. You can't hide from God. No way. So here you go. Pass through the land as a river, O daughter of Tarshish. There is no more strength. He stretches out his hand over the sea. He shook the kingdoms. The Lord hath given a commandment against the merchant city to destroy the strongholds thereof. And he said, Thou shalt no more rejoice, O thou oppressed virgin, daughter of Zidon. Arise, pass over to Chidon. There also shalt thou have no rest. There's no escape. There is no escape. You can try, but you won't succeed. So this destruction of Tyre would result in a land-based east-west trade route. So because they can't go by sea anymore, there is a way that they can go by a trade route. So they would travel by road to and from Tarshish because the sea routes would be ended. God hath judged Tyre, and now the ancient world's caravan routes would be filled with long, hard miles, filled with bandits and other troubles like weather and broken down machinery and wagons and things, or sick horses or oxen, whatever is pulling the wagon. So God had arisen to destroy Tyre. They had no cause anymore to rejoice over their prosperity. It's kind of, I want you picture this, okay? So shipping was the best way to travel if you wanted to take goods. And even today, I mean, we still have large ships, big container ships, taking things across, and we need those container ships. You can't use airplanes for all that. You need the ships, right? Well, and in those days, if you took away the ships and they all went into the caravan routes by land, that would really hinder things. It would slow everything down. It would make things. It would snarl the roads. It was just a terrible way to travel. So much easier. You get in the ship and go across. Yes, so much easier for them. And not anymore. I says, I'm going to end that. Oh boy, that's going to make things very hard for these people. Okay, so he had risen to destroy Tyre. So there was no more cause to rejoice over there in their prosperity. The lords of Tyre would have to flee to Cyprus, but they would not find any rest there either. No, there would be no rest for them. That was it. God was ending Tyre. The Babylonians would come and bring destruction to Tyre. Now he tells them how it's going to happen. It's going to be the Babylonians. Very interesting verse 13. So let's look at it. Behold, the land of the Chaldeans, that's Babylon. This people was not till the Assyrian founded it for them that dwell in the wilderness. They set up the towers thereof, they raised up the palaces thereof, and he brought it to ruin. Who did that? The Babylonians. That's what it's saying there. So what does it mean? Well, the Assyrians, it does mention the Assyrians, which is interesting, I'll tell you why. The Assyrians and Babylonians would eventually come and weaken and destroy Tyre. Okay? Assyria made sense in Isaiah's day because that empire existed in his time. The Assyrians attacked Tyre in 705 BC and continued in a long campaign against them from 681 to 669. Now, 705 would mean that Isaiah was still alive, so he probably heard the news. He could have been alive in 681, but I think he died in 685. Okay? But we're not sure about that. But that's about the time when Manasseh became king. Adding Babylon to this prophecy caused it to be troubling, since at the time of Isaiah, Babylonia was a simple vassal state under the mighty empire of Assyria. This prophecy would not be fulfilled until the time of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, which would be more than 100 years in the future from Isaiah. So Nineveh fell in 609. That's when Nebuchadnezzar became the leader of the known world at that time, the world leader, and Babylon became a world empire. This would make the Babylonian attack at around 572 BC. Therefore, verse 13 becomes a fascinating verse to those of us who understand the circumstances surrounding the city of Tyre. Okay? So, now he's telling you how it's going to fall. The merchant sailors should mourn over the sad news of the destruction of Tyre. Of course they should. Because it's over for them. Their economic strength is finished. How, ye ships of Tarshish? Of course, that's all the way to the western side, right? For your strength is laid waste. And it shall come to pass in that day that Tyre shall be forgotten 70 years. This is an interesting thing. We'll come back to that. According to the days of one king, after the end of 70 years, shall Tyre sing as an harlot. Take an harp, go about the city, thou harlot that hast been forgotten. Make sweet melodies, sing many songs, that thou mayest be remembered. And it shall come to pass after the end of 70 years that the Lord will visit Tyre, and she shall turn to her hire, and shall commit fornication with all the kingdoms of the world upon the face of the earth. Now that last phrase is very interesting, and I think this one ties into Revelation. We'll get into that, and I'll just explain that to you in just a moment. But first of all, I want to talk about, okay, I didn't get that last part. Sorry about that. Just wait for a minute. All right. So you can look at that. I'm sorry, I should have gotten ahead of there. I got ahead of you, but anyway. Okay, Nebuchadnezzar would cause the strength of Tyre, or the Phoenicians, to fail. The meaning of Phoenician. You ever wonder what Phoenician means? Okay, it means purple people. That's what it means, purple people. Now, it doesn't mean that the people were purple necessarily. It refers to the purple dye that they would extract from sea snails harvested along their coast. So they were known for the sea snails that would provide a purple dye that was very expensive. This was God's will for the destruction of Tyre, and that they would howl or greatly mourn after its destruction. Tyre would then be forgotten, it says, 70 years, as there would be no trade due to the captivity of Judah. That could be it. I believe that's it. 605 to 536 BC. When Israel returned from their captivity, 536 BC, Tyre's trade would commence, but Tyre would be metaphorically described as an old harlot who would need to sing for her custom since her beauty had faded away long ago. So this is a metaphor. Tyre would be prosperous, but she would never be again as she was before. She's going to fade. Her strength and her glory would tarnish and fade. Now, let's talk about today, because we got that last phrase there, and it reminds me of something. Tyre taught the ancient world well, didn't they? Yeah, economic harlotry is being practiced today. We see compromising international conglomerates who will bow, take the knee, and scrape in the gutter of this world. Modern politicians will do the world's bidding, whatever the cost. There are churches and Christian denominations who will also take part and join in today's political, economic, social, and moral compromise. These sinful compromisers will say and do anything just so they can get paid. So, we can certainly liken the spirit of Tyre to today's world that we know will bend to any whim just as long as they get paid. Truly, we can see that there is nothing new under the sun. And God reminds us this in the book of Revelation. So I'd like to read this to you, and I want you to think about what we're reading about Tyre, and you're going to see the correlation here with Revelation 18 is very interesting. So let me read it to you. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. And every shipmaster and all the company in ships and sailors and as many as trade by seas stood afar off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust in on their heads, and they cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles. Does God love this economy? No. And prophets, for God hath avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. And no craftsman of whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in thee. And the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee. And the voice of the bridegroom and of the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth. For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of the prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. Do you see the correlation here between Babylon and the Babylon of the sea, Tyre? And we have the history of the destruction of Tyre. And many Old Testament prophets talk about it. So Babylon is today's world system that hates Christian marriage and a godly family. I'm going to just tell you guys right now, the world economic system of today does not love family and Christian marriage. Okay? Let me just put it to you plain. They don't. They're not for it. They're against it. So be aware of that. Be aware of that with your children in school. Be aware of that with your families. I'm warning you. Listen to me carefully. They're not on your side. You need to be careful. Okay? So I'm warning you, and I've told you. So these adherents hate personal freedoms against their agenda and will accept any system that will pay them. These people are in love with money, and with them, it is always about the money. Always. We must remember the warning of Paul once again in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 10. And don't ever say money is the root of all evil. You're misquoting scripture. It doesn't say that. It says, for the love of money is the root of all evil. So if we're going to quote it correctly. Which, while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Now, money itself is neutral. We can use it for good. Obviously, we can. But we should not be so attached to money that we will do anything we can to make it. And those who love money will ignore morals that disagrees with it so that they just can make money. And this was the sin of Tyre. The powerful empire of Tyre was destroyed over the love of money. But how? Well, Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the mainland of Tyre when he besieged the city in 586 to 573 BC. It took 13 years. The city along the coast was eventually flattened by his army. Boy, when they got to the end of it, they were so angry, they knocked down and pulled down every house, just as the prophecy said it would. They flattened it. And there was an island in the bay. Now, this is interesting. It survived. And so the city carried on. They moved to the island. And they carried on their trade from the island of Tyre because the mainland was destroyed. Well, that went on for a couple hundred years. And in 332 BC, this was when the Greeks of Alexander the Great came to Tyre. And what he did was he had the ruins along the coast of Tyre thrown into the city, the sea, into the sea. They were thrown into the sea. You know, I want to make sure you get this. And this created a causeway bridge to the island. You all know what a causeway is, right? Okay. It's a land bridge between an island. We call it a causeway. And that's what he did. He created a causeway using the ruins from the mainland. Okay. And you can study the chapter 26 to 28 of Ezekiel with that in mind, and it'll tell you exactly what will happen. Now, when this was accomplished, his army destroyed the island of Tyre. So once he got the land bridge built, the causeway, they went in and destroyed the island. Yes. Today, this island is connected to the mainland. There's no island anymore. Oh, the island's still there, but it's filled in. So geographically, if you go onto like Google Maps or something and you look at the city of Tyre, it's in Lebanon today. Look down, you'll see it. It's funny looking. It's like a straight, pointy, but tiny peninsula. Okay. Well, I can tell you that was man-made. Alexander's army did that. He filled it in, okay, all the way to the island. So the ruins on the mainland, once again, were thrown into the sea, creating reefs and land, just as Ezekiel further prophesied. He said, you wipe it. God said, I'm going to wipe Tyre off the map. And it's like one would take a dish and just wipe it clean. He says, that's what I'm going to do. And that's what happened. Exactly as was prophesied. And it was never rebuilt to its former glory ever again. And today, it's just a nothing city. It's nothing. Okay? So some scholars say that Tyre was dormant for a literal 70 years. Okay? Well, it says that. Others try to say the 70 years was symbolic of a long period of time. Now, if this was literal, it may have happened around 700 to 630 BC. Some think that with the Assyrians. This dormant period of Tyre would be during the Assyrian captivity of of Israel. Well, but you got Judah. It may have also been during the 70-year captivity of Judah, who were taken to Babylon 605 to 536 BC, and that's what I believe. I think that it was more likely that time. Regardless, during the 70 years, the Jews would have forgotten the city of Tyre, yet when they returned from captivity, they were once again trading with Tyre. Tyre would also be a supply of materials for the rebuilt temple of Jerusalem in 536 BC, which was during the governor Zerubbabel's day when they returned from Babylon. Now, verse 18 is interesting, and that's going to go towards the next chapter, which that's going to be finished, isn't it? We're going to go into the apocalypse after that. But verse 18 is really interesting, okay? Because verse 18 is actually positive. Every other verse, from verse 1 to 17, is a burden. But the chapter ends with a blessing, okay? So God would bless Tyre during the millennial reign of Christ. When Jesus comes, Tyre is going to be blessed. Let me show it to you. It's really interesting. Okay, just one verse, but it says so much. And her merchandise and her hire shall be holiness to the Lord. What? When will this happen? Was there any time? Well, there were things that she gave that were holiness, but this is talking about forever. It shall not be treasured nor laid up, for her merchandise shall be for them that dwell before the Lord to eat sufficiently and for durable clothing. So it's not talking about the cedars of Lebanon for the temple. This is talking about clothing and food. Okay. So what's this referring to? Well, this is referring to the millennium of Christ. Very interesting verse. Tyre will be restored during the millennium of Christ. There's still going to be a Mediterranean Ocean when Jesus comes to the earth. Still going to be there. Okay. And so Tyre is going to be a city along the coast that will be restored and be utilized by the Lord. So this city will someday be holy to the Lord, and her trade will be accomplished in righteousness, it says. So no more of this economic harlotry. That's finished. Okay? Like what we have today. That's done. Tyre will again become a major sea trading port for the Mediterranean Sea. During the millennium, we never think, well, will they have trade during the millennium of Christ? They will. And where will be a sea shipping port? It'll be Tyre. Tyre will do that. Okay, this is so interesting. So this is a future prophecy right there. So this will happen during the time when Jesus comes and reigns upon the earth for 1,000 years. And we are done. Okay. So thank you for just say to, well, if you want to listen, yeah. Well, maybe the people in recording will want. So what was the question again? Okay, so if you go to Haifa, northern Israel, you go across the border to Lebanon, you go maybe about 40 miles, 30 to 40 miles along the seacoast, and you'll see Tyre. Just follow it along and you'll come to Tyre. And then north of it is Sidon. Okay. So the Tyre to the south, Sidon to the north. Yes, it is. It is called Tyre today. And Sidon's still called Sidon. So yeah, and they're there, and the ruins are there. And if you look at it in Google, it's so interesting because if you look at it on Google Maps, you can actually see where the ships would come in on the island. And you can see how the causeway was filled in. And it makes a really funny peninsula. It really is interesting. So have a look at that. It is very interesting. And that's a fulfillment of prophecy. It's a fulfillment of the word of God. And it's so interesting. That's a major city reduced to rubble, nothing. And it was prophesied by the Lord. So can God destroy an economy? Absolutely, he did. He's done it. All right.